Hello again, welcome back. We're back to discussing CSS, and in this discussion, what I'd like to do is introduce the idea of Sas and CSS preprocessors. For this example, I'm going to follow up with the example from our animation exercise, right? So, I have my animation here, and there's a lot of repeated code in here, and Sas is going to help us clean this up. Okay, you can actually apply all these ideas to any, project that uses CSS, right? So this can apply to anything. For this example, I'm going to use the code that we did in the last set of videos on animation. So we built this little animation here, right? Okay, so what is Sas? Well, Sas stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets. Okay, let's go look up Sas right now. I'm going to go to sas-lang.com, and here's the Sas website, right? So it says CSS with superpowers, right? And it says Sas is the most mature, stable, and powerful professional-grade CSS extension language in the world, right? Okay, so what is Sas, right? Well, it stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets, okay? So what does that mean, right? CSS with superpowers, right? Sas is a language that contains the CSS language. So anything you write in CSS can be written in Sas, okay? Sas also adds new features on top of the standard CSS. So it adds variables and mix-ins. A mix-in is like a function. So it's like we're adding variables and functions to our CSS. It adds a lot of, like CSS has a few functions built into it. Sas builds on those and adds more. And it gives us a new syntax for declaring selectors, okay? And so Sas, though, cannot be used in the browser. So if you write a file in the Sas language, the browser will not recognize it. Sas is called a preprocessor. So the idea is that we run the Sas processor on files written in the Sas language, and the preprocessor converts those files, the Sas files, into regular CSS. So it allows us to write in the Sas language, which is richer and has more features, and then compile it to vanilla CSS for production. Okay? So how does it work, right? Let's do it right now. So Sas needs to be installed, and there's a couple tools you can use. If you're on the Sas website here, you can go to install, and you can install an application. And there's a whole list of applications here. These all say paid, except for Scout, which is free and open source, right? So you can download these apps and you run them on your desktop. There's another app also called Koala that they don't list here. Like koala, like the marsupial, like from Australia, the little bear, right? Okay. Yeah, it's called just look up Koala app, right? Actually, I'll look it up. Koala app, there we are, right? Koala, right? So you can use this to compile your Sas, and this is a free tool also. See, that's the animal right there, okay? Right, so you can use any of these tools here. These are all paid except for Scout app, so you can use Scout or you can use Koala if you need a free one. The other way that you can compile your Sas is using the command line, right? And that's what we're going to do in this lesson. So we're going to use the command line tool. To use the command line tool, you'll need to install it. So I'm going to go down here to the command line section. So I'm in command line, and then, you could read about it here and learn more about Sas. If you have Node, you can install it using npm, right? So they're going to do a Node or npm install -g for global and then Sas. So you don't need to install Sas separately for every project, and you don't need a package JSON. You can just do npm install, and if you install it globally, it's useful anywhere. There's also some extensions for VS Code and Atom and other text browsers, right? So I have Watch Sas installed here, and you can see there's a button at the bottom. So if I click this, it's kind of like it runs the global Sas for me, right? Okay, so I'm going to install this right now, and I'll open up my terminal here. I'll make a new terminal window actually, and I already installed it, but I'll just install it again. I'll just do install Sas, and there we go. Done. Okay, easy as pie. So how does it work? Let's do an example, okay? We'll do a short example here. I'm going to scroll to the top, and you can go to Learn Sas, right? And you can read, I encourage you to read through some of this, right? And it talks more about Sas and the language and how the processor works. They give us two commands that we can use, right? So one of them is sas -- watch, and you say the input file, and then you say the output file, okay? So Sas is going to read this file and then convert it into this file, okay? So notice that the input file uses the .scss extension. So that's like Sas CSS. And the output file is regular CSS, okay? This example does the same thing, but it just includes like a folder path. So here you can say watch this folder, the Sas folder, colon, output to the public folder style sheets. Okay? So if you have a folder and you're like, I want to watch all the files in this folder, then you can use this this syntax here. So you say, path to the folder that you want to watch, colon, and then the output folder that you want to save files to, okay? And in this case, the file will always be saved to the name of the input file, okay? Over here, we named the input file and we named the output file. I'm going to use this example right now, okay? So I'm going to copy this, and then we'll run this in a moment, right? So let's make a Sas file first, and then it'll make this do something for us, right? So I'm going to go to my files here, and I have a style sheet file here that's a .css file. I'm going to rename this to .scss. Okay, and then you can see that, actually, you know what, I guess I still had this running. I'm going to actually stop Sas. It kind of cheated because it made the files for me. I'm going to delete these two, and we're going to pretend that didn't happen, right? So I'm going to delete those guys, move to trash, right? And you can see here I've changed this into a Sas file, and then, VS Code kind of puts this little Sas script, right, or this little symbol next to this to tell me that that's an SCSS or Sas file, okay? And otherwise, everything's fine. I don't see any errors or warnings or anything, right? So this code that we had before, our regular CSS code, works, right? Now, the problem here is that the index file doesn't point to the SCSS file, and it can't, right? Because the browser doesn't understand .scss, okay? Right? And you would say, well, actually this code is all the same, and it is, but we can add more and different code to this that the browser won't understand, right? So, and we're going to do that in a coming step. So this won't be compatible with the browser, even though it is at the moment, okay? So how do we turn this into a CSS file, right? I'm going to open up my terminal here, and what happened to my other term? I guess I closed it. Let me open it up again, right? There we go. I'm going to open this up here and change directories into my class 12 directory here, which is where I'm working. And now I'm going to launch my my Sas command, right? So this is my command. It's going to be sas -- watch. Now the -- watch flag means that anytime this file changes, Sas will run again and process it, right? So that way you don't have to run the command over and over again. Without the watch flag, you could run Sas one time on this file, okay? And these are not the right file names, so I'm going to change that. I'm going to say styles.scss as the input file and styles.css as the output file. Okay, and there I've ran it, and it says, hey, compiled style SCSS to style CSS. And when I look in here, you can see it now created two new files. So it created a style CSS file and a style css.map. We can ignore the map file for now. This is kind of an extra file that's used for debugging. So it basically connects this one to the one down here. So when you're looking at the code, the browser might see a style sheet error in this file because that's what it's reading, but the map will map it to the other file and tell us where that error occurred in here, okay? So this is just for debugging. You can leave that, you can ignore that, right? Okay, let's make some changes, right? So I like what I have here, and it seems to be working, but what I want to do is I want to use some Sas features, right? So how is Sas going to save me time and energy, right? So Sas has a couple things that it does for us, right? One, it allows us to define variables, right? So I'm working in the .scss file. So I'm going to do all my work here. I'm never going to edit the CSS file because that's going to be generated automatically, okay? So Sas lets us create variables. These are different from CSS custom properties, okay? Totally different. They seem to act the same, but they're actually very different. I'm going to go into the differences later, but Sas variables always begin with a $sign. So I have a width and a height here, and imagine that I wanted to, let's call this like container size colon, and I want to make this 300 pixels, okay? And so instead of using this name twice, I'm just going to put the Sas variable in place, like this. And then I'll save, and the animation runs again because it recreated this file, the CSS file. And if I look in the CSS file, you can see it just says 300 here, okay? So the variables in Sas are just used as kind of placeholders, and they replace a value, and then their value is used where they exist, right? So they're not live, like they can't change while the code is running. They just are used at the moment that you compile your Sas file, okay? So let's see, what else are we going to do here? Maybe the size here, right, the width and height of the div, I want to make that, let's make this like 2/3 of the container size, okay? So Sas also lets us use operators. So in a lot of languages, you have operators that you use like plus, minus, and multiply, right, and divide. And Sas just lets us use those in our CSS. So maybe I'll do, maybe I'll change this. This container size is like really long. I'm going to just make it size. How about that? It'll be just shorter to type. So I'll save that, and then down here I'm going to say size times 0.66. Okay, there we go. So that'll be 2/3. Maybe I'll copy this and put it in here. Also notice that when I, okay, so actually this is really great that I made a mistake there. When you have a problem with Sas, you're going to get an error like this, okay? So don't worry about it. It's just telling you like, hey, expected a semicolon near line 16. So if I go in here and I look around line 16, you can see like, you know, this looks okay, but I'm missing the semicolon right above it. And when I save again, when I make the fix and save again, then it's going to go back to normal. So if you see errors like that, just keep your cool, take a deep breath, you know, read the error message, go to your code, look at what you did, you know, just now, and then see if you can figure out what the problem is, right? So anyway, so there's our variable there. What else can we do with Sas? What are we gonna do here? Let's see. Let's go down here. Oh yeah, you know, maybe this transform origin right here of 150, that actually worked out to be half of this number. So let's do that down here. Maybe this could be size, you know, times 0.5, and then this one will be size times 0.5, right? So I'm going to put a 0 in front of that to make it a little more legible, right? So my challenge to you now is to look at your code and think of all the things that could be variables. and go through here and replace those values with variables so you have variables at the top. And what this will do for you is it'll make it so you're not repeating values, and it'll give you a place where you can easily change those values to update your code and modify your page, which is a big time saver while you're working, right? So let me give some suggestions. So this number 45 degrees is used in a lot of places, right? That would be a great one for a variable, right? The colors, even though these only appear once, they're a good candidate for a variable because we may want to update the colors here and change the whole color of the lotus, right? And we could calculate the colors also, so that might be good. So making a variable for each one of these lotus colors would be great, okay? And then down here, if we have our base angle right here, you could calculate this angle and these two angles from that original base angle, right? So if we started at 45 degrees, we'd know that this is 45, this would be minus 45 minus 45, this would be 45 minus 90, right? So that would help us calculate the values and the positions for each of the rotations for each of the petals, right? So if you think about the math of that, and then you go through and replace as many of the elements here with variables as you can, and that'll be good practice with Sas, okay? And then we'll continue in the next video. And as always, thanks for watching.